Why? Like you said, like you're gonna stop all these wars.
That's the real thing for me with the SIGNALGATE, is I feel like everyone is focusing on the aspect of it of, oh, it got leaked, the group chat got leaked, and it's kind of just flown under the radar. Like, yeah, we're bombing Yemen. Like, yeah, I mean, I didn't know. Were we doing that before? Because that could have started a couple months ago. That seems like something we'd do.
Yo, guys, how we doing? So Scott made his return. I've been doing a lot of repeat guests lately. It's good to have Dan finally in the studio now. It was fun. We revisited a lot of the JFK podcast that I did with Shane. So if you haven't checked out those first 2 parts, please do that. And then we talked about a lot of society and culture and a little bit of faith, a little bit of science and whatnot, and just a lot of commentary on kind of the political sides of America these days. So hope you enjoy it. More to come, and I will have some never before guests coming on soon, so stay tuned. Peace. What's up, guys? This is The Last House on the Left. This is where I chop it up with my friends, kill time, and speak what's on my mind. I have an old guest. I've been doing a lot of old guests lately, and hopefully we're going to be talking about much more than movies, Scott. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Yeah. I've been preaching about the JFK, the movie. I've been telling you to watch it for how long now? It's probably at least a month or 2
weeks. Yeah, I know we all wanted to watch it together, so that's kind of the only reason I haven't seen it yet. But
okay.
I was just listening to the previous episode 29 and 30 of Last House on the Left.
Yeah,
featuring Shane Greska. So
the one and only.
There's a lot of good stuff in there, and the production value has really gone crazy since the last time I was on.
I'm trying, man. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of work. Editing the multi-camera angles is tough because when you pull it into the Logic, or not the Logic, well, you have to edit everything through Logic, like just one camera angle, and then when you bring in the second one, it's not as bad. But when you're actually editing and you have when you're in iMovie, you have to basically run the 2 videos on top of each other. And once I say something and it cuts to you, and think how many times you do that over, for Shane and I's.
And you had a lot of graphics too on the screen.
Dude, so many photos. Think about how many different names we were talking about.
I know, yeah. Because I was familiar mostly with the Lee Harvey Oswald side of the story, but all the stuff about John Ferry and
David Ferry, yeah.
David Ferry and Guy Bannister and all those guys.
Jeez.
That was some interesting stuff.
So David Ferry and Guy Bannister, that will be explained much better in the JFK movie. I felt like looking back on it and editing it for so long, it's like, dude, you could have been a lot better communicating that. But there were so many names, man. And then there's all the different aspects of the CIA and the FBI. And then let me throw this question to you. We'll obviously talk about as I mentioned at the end of the episode 30 with Shane. There's still more to talk about, so we'll start there and then we'll go wherever else. Like I said, I got a lot of other very conspiracy adjacent topics that we could jump on.
All right,
and
let's
whatnot.
get into it.
So you said you knew a lot about Oswald and whatnot. What were things that you weren't aware of, listening to me and Shane's very thorough, and because he brought his own laptop. You saw that too?
Yeah.
I was
he
like,
had a lot
holy
of
cow.
good. I knew a little bit about JFK, but he had
A little closer to the mic, right on it. Thanks.
He had the whole history lesson on JFK, which I thought was pretty interesting. You guys talked about the extended Kennedy family a lot, which very interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen their place by the Cape. But
no, I didn't know that they were from Boston. I thought they were from the greater New England area, but yeah. So what are your theories on Lee Harvey Oswald? So do you think he acted alone? All the different aspects regarding Jack Ruby and whatever. At some point eventually down the line, I'll know more about the mob stuff, but I've been hearing through different credible sources and through some of the podcasters. These podcasters they have on are, I really like them, so I would like to think they're pretty legitimate. But they fact check themselves a lot. They'll always like admit when they're wrong, but they have a lot of historians or experts on, and then they like kind of lob all the questions to them. And one of the reasons when I not first got onto the case, but Julian Doria had this guy Joseph Scott Morgan, who was a not a forensics. He would deal forensics pathologist maybe. I'm trying to think of the word. Anyways, he would deal with a lot of like bodies when it comes to like these weird circumstances and deaths and whatnot.
Yeah. So I kind
right on that mic.
I kind of agree with what Shane was saying, which is that it is hard to believe that he was acting alone. I mean, it is possible. It is. I can't determine who he would have been working for, because whoever it was covered their tracks really well, and there's not enough evidence to put it on any one person. Like I said, I listened to the first episode and like half of the second one, so I didn't hear what you guys had to say about the magic bullet stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the last part? I'm trying to remember the episode I literally just did. Well, it was a couple weeks ago now. So that's where you left off, was that part?
Yeah, you were talking about Oswald. You were talking about him going to Russia and what he was doing there.
There were so many weird things about. When I look back on it more, when it comes to Oswald, do you think he actually? So for for a little bit of a second, more like a couple of days, I'm like, did he even make a shot? I'm thinking he absolutely was making. He definitely like shot, but the thing is, like, were there more people? So Shane brought up this whole thing a couple days later when we all went out to eat, where when we were arguing or whatever, or me being curious and him putting me down for not knowing some of these. I didn't know. I heard of the Daltex building. Is that what it is?
That's the book depository.
So that's the building next to the book depository.
That's the building next to the book.
So
okay.
There's a whole nother guy that got arrested and whatever that was also in the book depository, but they never found a gun.
Yeah.
All these things. And so let me pull this up as well. Hopefully I can multitask this as best as I can. So when it came to Oswald shooting Kennedy, so the Warren Commission comes out and says there's 3 bullets, right, that got shot. So if in JFK Revisited, which is like a follow-up 25 years after the original Oliver Stone documentary, which is still by the same guy. He's just, I think they decided to do more stuff where they went more in depth about the autopsy and the magic bullet. But essentially, so there's 3 shots, the 3 shots that Oswald shot or whatever. The first one like goes through Kennedy's neck, and then it goes through, or the first one I think misses, which hits the curb. The second one goes through Kennedy's neck, which then goes through his chest, like, because it's shooting downward. It goes through. I put up a diagram actually in that video where you can see, and so it goes through his neck, chest, and then it goes into Governor Connolly's like lung, and then somehow he had like a fractured hand, and then he also like it comes back up and hits and exits through his thigh. So it's just this stupid theory that if there was at the time if there was more than 3 bullets, it's impossible to label it just one shooter.
Yeah.
It's literally not possible.
Yeah, I figure if there was another shooter in the grassy knoll or not, it doesn't really matter too much, because it would have just been another patsy probably. So
yeah, so that's where me and Shane actually like really disagree. Yeah. I read this book, or I just bought it actually. I started it, called The Man on the Sixth Floor, and it follows. Hold on, let me we'll be right back, guys. All right, guys, sorry, we're back. I had to search for a second my old notes. So this is so via the Man on the Sixth Floor, that book. So this follows, basically, there was a guy at the end of his life, Loy Factor, who admitted that he was one of the people that was involved in the conspiracy. So there's parts of Loy Factor's story that like seems not exactly credible when it comes to like how he claims that he was up in the building. So it's like in the building, it's him, Oswald. There's another guy, Malcolm Wallace, who Malcolm Wallace in his whole part in the JFK assassination, from what this book says specifically, is I think the most interesting, because Malcolm Wallace had ties to Lyndon B. Johnson. He had an affair with Lyndon B. Johnson's sister. He was in a love triangle with Lyndon B. Once again, Lyndon B. Johnson's sister. And then I'll just read it from the notes, actually, and then it will make more sense so I don't sound like a blubbering idiot. So this guy, Lloyd Factor, so he admitted to killing Kennedy on his deathbed. So he claims he was one of three shooters, which is absolutely insane. So up in the book depository, he claims it's him, it's Oswald, and this other woman like Ruthie Ann, and then the third shooter, Wallace, is down low. So this woman, Ruthie Ann, was like a young Hispanic woman who was calling all the shots. So why trust this guy's testimony? He's just a random dude. So this guy, Lloyd Factor, he was a Chickasaw Native American, so Army veteran, a rancher. He like hunted and fished as well. This is all actually true. It's more his like claims is what's openly debated and whatever. So he survived a shrapnel injury from his service in World War II, so suffering brain damage. So he was discovered by one of these journalists, this guy Mark Callum, who wrote this book, co-authored it with this other guy, Glenn Sample. So he's discovered by this guy Mark Callum in a hospital when Callum, this guy, contracted hepatitis in 1971. So in this isolation ward, him and this guy Lloyd Factor became close. So he found out, once again, guys, I'm reading straight off my notes if you're watching the video. I'll almost be done. And he found out, like, by this guy Factor, that he... that he committed the crime for Kennedy. However, Lloyd Factor was in prison for 44 years for allegedly killing his wife. So that's another, once again, there's a whole nother rabbit trail to go down, which this whole book encases and entails. This guy, once again, Lloyd Factor, he never admitted to something about like his child at the time was the one that killed his wife. So just like super interesting. But the reason why Callum finds Lloyd Factor in this hospital is because in prison Lloyd Factor got shot in the arm.
Yeah,
like someone was trying to kill him. So at night he's in a cell, and the way that the prison was set up is that like you couldn't get like, it was just like a weird setup when it came to the prison, where you couldn't get super close to the cell. So this one guy goes, "Hey, Mr. Factor," like someone who sound like he was slightly identified as like a white man of like middle aged or like early 30s, but like a normal white dude. And so he goes and like Factor like try to looks outside his cell and gets shot in the arm. So anyways, so he gets shot in the arm by this mysterious white male in his 30s. And this guy, Mark Callum, he meets up with in his old school friend, Mark Sample. So this guy, Mark Callum, his friend is a writer, right? Who sends this story to a journalist, but this journalist who finds out this story is like, no, this is incredible at all, and it never goes anywhere. So, over almost 20 years later, actually it was so in 1992, with the release of the movie JFK, they reach out to this guy Larry Howard, and so Larry Howard is the head of the JFK Assassination Information Center. So he looks into this like reluctantly, because he's like, what is this actually? It's like been like years and years, and there's a couple different people that claim like they were the JFK shooter. This other guy, James, I'm trying to think what his name is. Let me look that up, actually. Alleged JFK shooter.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done the due diligence on this Lloyd Factor guy, but
James Files, that's who it is.
But what I would say is just that having 3 shooters does seem a little bit excessive if you're trying to keep the conspiracy under wraps,
Absolutely.
Because having one shooter, they had Lee Harvey Oswald, and I don't know if he was involved in the mob or not, but he did the job possibly, and then he got taken out, and then all the loose ends were taken care of. So I do feel like having 3 shooters could be a bit much.
Well, another thing I mentioned to Shane is like, there's no way that the mob, the CIA, and everybody was out to to kill this guy. Like, but also I think a ton of people hated him. So I'll try to wrap. So I find all this like super. Just personally for me, once again, there are more inaccuracies with this story. That definitely makes some sense. But just wrapping this up, and so so this guy Mark Howard looks into the story of this guy Loy Factor, and an interesting part of some of the credible stuff that Loy Factor was saying is that the day before, when him, Oswald, and Ruth Ann, who he claims to, she was this woman that had she didn't have a gun, but she was at the top of the tower with a recording device. She was the one. She was the one who ended up. You know what? I'm actually going to keep reading because I say it later in my notes, and then like I said, I'm saying this is what I think this is possible, not probable. So, so once again, this guy Larry Howard looks into it, and he thinks some of the stuff checks out. Then they interview Factor, who's about to die of diabetes. So basically this happens like he meets Factor. Mark meets Factor in 70. They try to make it happen. Doesn't end up because the journalist thinks it's not a real story. 20 years later, they come back to Factor, who's still alive, but he's on his deathbed. So, so here's Factor's testimony, right? Via, Mark Sample and, or Colum and Mark Sample. So Loy stammered through an unconvincing explanation of how he merely assisted the group, that the woman was the radio operator, Oswald and the man who hired Loy were the shooters, and that he had been nothing more than some sort of backup. This is talking about Loy, so he didn't even pull the trigger or whatever. He reaffirmed the story of Sam Rayburn's funeral and his chance meeting with a stranger. I'll get into that in a second. The target practice incident and his being picked up and driven to Dallas 2 days before the assassination. He told of the little house that served as the base of operation, the individuals at the house, including the appearance of Jack Ruby and Lee Oswald. He stated that after the shots were fired, everyone but Oswald escaped out the back door of the building, and with he and the younger woman leading the way. So, basically, when he was saying about this guy Sam Rayburn's funeral, so Loy Factor back in the day, he meets this Hispanic man. His name's Mac Wallace. When trying to get a glimpse of Kennedy at this guy Congressman Rayburn's funeral, this random congressman that JFK knew. So many people these days would like go be like, hey, if I go to this random guy's funeral, I'll be able to go see the president. So this is the narrative that I think is interesting. So I think that this guy Malcolm Wallace is CIA. So I'll try to wrap this all up, and cut me off if I'm, going all over the place, which I can already tell I am. But we'll get to other things, like I said. So at this funeral, like this random guy starts talking to Loy Factor, because like I said, Loy Factor's an Indian guy. Malcolm Wallace was Hispanic, so they start speaking to each other in Spanish. They're getting along. Wallace mentions how Kennedy is easy, accessible to anyone to come and like. Basically, he says like a sinister. I forget what the exact phrase is. It says in the book, but it makes you wonder. I'm like, wow, like who would randomly go up to someone and say that even in those days? So Factor tells this guy Wallace about his life, his family, his hunting skills, etc. And Wallace, being apparently a very friendly and like nice guy or whatever, gives him like $20 at the time, which was a lot of money to spend on his family. And obviously, like Loy Factor was very poor. And so Factor's like, oh, thank you so much. And as the funeral ends, he gives this guy Malcolm Wallace his address it's like, if you ever want to come by or whatever, let me know. We can go shooting. So a couple weeks later, Wallace stops by. This is all via the testimony. Wallace, this guy, who later has ties to CIA or whatever, he stops by a little while later and tells Loy Factor that hey, I'd love to come see you shoot, man. It was good to meet you or whatever. And it's like interesting that this guy would show up at his door. Yeah. So after seeing, once again, just bear with me or whatever, I just think this is super interesting. So after seeing his skills while they go out shooting, Wallace mentions, she's like, hey, I might have a job for you with that rifle someday. And then he just he like kind of walks away. So once again, Loy Factor is like broke, like a Native American living in modern day America. So I'm just going to go about this a little bit more about Malcolm Wallace and Lyndon B. Johnson, and then more thoughts. So any interesting I wonder if the mic picked that up. Any interesting thoughts still? Is it just kind of, it's just a story, right, that you're hearing third person?
Yeah, I haven't had time to research Loy Factor on my own, so I'm just kind of experiencing this
Yeah.
as the podcast listeners
This
are
is,
also
these aren't,
experiencing
yeah.
this.
These aren't Dan's opinions, guys. I'm just forcing them upon him and anyone listening. So
No, I'm going to be very quiet because Shane was killed by the CIA after the last couple of episodes. So I don't want to say anything too risky here.
Yeah. So all this buildup basically, I think, is more important. I think this guy Malcolm Wallace, who I personally think is whether second or third shooter, I think Malcolm Wallace is this guy in the grassy knoll. Shane thinks there wasn't someone in the grassy knoll, but when Kennedy gets shot through the head, his head goes back. So I think that comes from whoever was shooting. Whether it was the grassy knoll, I think someone shot him on the ground. I think it was this guy Malcolm Wallace. So the whole Malcolm Wallace part is the interesting part. So he was born in 1921 to a farmer. He joined the Marines at 18. He was discharged 2 years later after a back injury, where he went to the University of Texas. In 1941, he became interested in politics and became the head of a student union where he led like 8,000 people actually to a protest to reinstate this guy, Homer Rainey, who was a fired American Socialist Party supporter. So kind of an interesting thought there.
Yeah.
So he graduates in 1947. So when he's working on his doctorate at Columbia University, he also was teaching at Texas and Carolina. So this guy Edward Clark, who's like high up in American politics at the time, connects Wallace with this guy Lyndon B. Johnson, who's just like a high value politician, not president at the time. So in 1950, Malcolm Wallace gets a job with the Department of Agriculture through Johnson, and other interesting things to Loy Factor is that it was well known that he had ties to CIA and other defense contractors. This guy Wallace. And Wallace was considered like a sharpshooter amongst his peers. So once again, the very critical books of, or Roger Stone's like very critical book was very heavily implying that like Wallace was CIA. So the reason why, what I think is that Mac Wallace was a CIA asset, which like basically I think Allen Dulles went down the ladder to get Malcolm Wallace to hire this guy. Hold on, these authors. Okay, so let me scrap that last sentence. So Roger Stone and these other similar JFK authors claim that Malcolm Wallace was a CIA asset and influenced Jack Ruby to recruit Oswald. So overall, once again, I kind of explained the whole Malcolm Wallace thing, but this is just the one Lyndon B. Johnson side, and then we can go on. So this woman, Marilyn Brown, once again, this all comes from this book. An interesting part about this book, too, which is, here's where it could be, is that the book was self-published. Like, no one, like, picked it up or whatever. So online, I've kind of seen, like, 50-50 about the accuracies of this book. Because, once again, but with all this information, we just don't know.
Yeah.
Like, where's the concrete evidence? Like, you're not going to ever get anything. So this last thing about Lyndon B. Johnson. So Marilyn Brown, she was a mistress of LBJ. So this is actually fact. So they had a son together, but they hid it from the public for 20 years. So the reason why, another reason why that this woman, which will make more sense, her testimony is kind of crazy, is that her son Stephen died of lymphatic cancer, which was the same cancer Lyndon B. Johnson's mother died of. So it was like hereditary and whatever. So they're Lyndon B. Johnson and Marilyn Brown, their relationship was built on hookups, which has been proven by like many journalists. So at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, this is I think around the 50s maybe. Let me look up John Kinzer's death. John Kinzer death. Okay, 1951. Great. Like I said, guys, I'm almost done. So his sister. So this is 1951. Lyndon B. Johnson's sister, Marilyn Brown, has a boyfriend, right? So this guy, John Kinzer, he was once again her boyfriend. He was also wanting to become a politician himself. Like went to an Ivy League school. He owned like a golf course and whatever. So at one point, he tried to get through, his girlfriend to her brother. He wanted like financial help, so he reached out to Johnson. Johnson refused, and he was annoyed and wanted to. Like Johnson's like, you guys need to break up. Like this guy's no good. So when this guy John Kinzer was upset about all this, he knew through his sister or his girlfriend that Lyndon B. Johnson was having mad affairs. Like there was a lot to do. There's a lot of like sex addict and gay stuff. All these crazy relationships in the 60s.
Even JFK himself was, getting around famously.
Yeah.
A lot of women.
Dude, do you know about the whole Marilyn Monroe?
Yes.
Can you talk about... Actually, let me finish this and we'll go to Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
So sorry. I will finish up this thought, guys. So, Wallace, what ends up happening is that this guy, Malcolm Wallace, kills John Kinzer in his own golf course. So, the police go and, like, find Wallace right after he kills him, like an hour later in the same car and whatever. He gets off scot-free by a lawyer like that's under Lyndon B. Johnson. Gets off scot-free. So just some that's just a very interesting thing regarding Malcolm Wallace. That is absolutely true with him getting off for a murder case. Someone was saying, and this is when it comes to, like, I don't know if it's a credible source, but Malcolm Wallace definitely had there were many like circumstances where the mysterious deaths happened and he was like involved or near. And that's where I'm trying to do more research. So once again, guys, with this part, I'm just kind of thinking aloud and processing aloud. I've been thinking about this a lot. So LBJ, once again, through Madeline Brown, she was mentioned at like years after that. Lyndon B. Johnson had mistresses on the side besides his wife, especially her. And once again, Malcolm Wallace was in this love triangle with so Lyndon B. Johnson's sister was Josepha Johnson. So it was just all this is mentioned in the book, and it's hard for me. All that being said, it's very hard for me to not. When I look at this guy Malcolm Wallace, I'm like, maybe he could have been the other shooter. That's what I take from the whole Loy Factor thing, because you really don't know. And even if this guy, say Loy Factor, was involved or whatever, he didn't really do anything at that case.
Yeah. So all of this information you're talking about, this wasn't available at the time of the shooting, right? This all came out with Loy Factor's book that he released later, or do people know about Wallace at the time?
So people know more about people think the whole Loy Factor thing is decently is kind of, it's just a big question mark. However, but the Loy Factor connection to Malcolm Wallace is absolutely, that's the mind-boggling one.
Yeah.
And part of Loy Factor's story is that 2 days beforehand, Oswald, when they were all meeting up, like Oswald, Ruby, and whatever, Oswald came in hot and pissed because he had found out that they changed the motorcade, which ended up being all right or whatever. But he goes into depth in the story about how Loy Factor was describing how upset and heated Oswald was. So it's just a freaking rabbit hole, man. I just don't. So talk about, we can move off JFK and whatever, but talk about Marilyn Monroe and all that stuff. It's like absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they were only photographed together like once, but it is kind of an open secret that JFK was bringing her around. Like, she was seen coming out of the White House on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
So,
and JFK had many mistresses.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So I didn't get the time to talk about this once again with Shane. But did you know that there were 2 other plots to actually kill Kennedy?
I don't know about these, but I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were lots of like failed attempts that I haven't heard about to try and kill lots of different presidents. So I would not be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great take with all this information that I'm gonna give. So so these were like motorcade, basically assassination. So
yeah.
The first one was supposed to be in Chicago on, I think, early November, like maybe the 3rd or the 4th maybe. and then one in Tampa on November 18th. So for Chicago, the FBI got a tip from an informant named Lee on October 31st. And the tip basically said there are 4 Cubans that were going to shoot Kennedy. The next day, the Chicago police so they got the tip from this guy Lee, and then a woman reports that like 4 Cubans were in a rented room in her hotel, and so they had 4 guns, all with scopes and whatever, and they had a layout of the motorcade, which is like, I'm surprised. Like, I guess that makes sense that you can have one back then.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. I guess it is kind of just like JFK was very much a populist kind of guy, so he wanted to be out there and seen by the people. I'm not sure. I think this was around the same time that the Pope got shot, wasn't it? Like John Paul II was shot on May 13th, on May 19th or May 13th, 1981.
Okay.
Pope John Paul II was shot. So that is why the Pope-mobile, I know they don't want you to call it that. I don't know what the official name is, though. But they have the bulletproof glass up on that now. But I don't know. I guess they just weren't considering it, which is weird because it's not like JFK was the first president to be assassinated.
Yeah. I know, right? So once again, this whole side thing of what happened in Chicago, which got prevented, once again, like, you have to give the FBI and CIA some credit. Like, you can't just be like, oh, they're terrible. Well, I guess you can. It's a free country or whatever.
Yeah.
I think after having like a big scrum with someone that I know, a verbal scrum, that is, what type of word am I saying? Scrum. It's like they can't have bad days, And so when it comes to that, it's just, I think that the FBI did their job basically on that one, and this is confirmed by this guy, Professor Paul Blau of St. Lawrence College in Quebec City. So he was this was a quote, this piece of information was part of the JFK Revisited. So they found 2 of these Cubans, but once they got 2 of the 4, they stonewalled them. They couldn't get any more information. So here's the other one for Tampa. So this guy, Thomas Arthur Valet, he was an outspoken dude about killing Kennedy. This guy, once again, just think about, I'm going to read some of these facts to you and think how similar this sounds. Ready? Ex-Marine. He was also on a Japan outpost, Camp Otso, which was the other one. Oswald was Camp Katsugi or something. I forget what it was. They were both in Japan. So this, once again, these are the flights that are going over these covert flights over Russia and whatever. So this Camp Otso in Japan, this was very heavily linked to the CIA. U-2 surveillance planes, trained Cubans. He trained Cubans for combat. Oswald, on a random note, also likely trained them Cubans as well, but it couldn't be confirmed. I mean, why not? After all the things we know, what else would he do?
We know he would have done it if he had the chance. Yeah, he was a huge supporter of the Cuban people.
Have you ever thought about this too, though, with Oswald, him being a possible double agent, though, where we send him over there and then he comes back? So like the CIA wanted him. Basically, maybe they're like, hey, go into Russia and you're going to do stuff for us. Or does he go into Russia just on his own accord? What do you think?
I don't know. I didn't even consider that until you just mentioned it, but it does kind of add up as to like, why would the CIA send him to Russia if he had Russian sympathies and if he had Cuban
that wouldn't
sympathies?
Be a good idea.
It doesn't make sense. But if he went there and had his mind changed while he was doing the work, that would make a lot more sense. Or he just went there on his own accord.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. So, going back to this guy, Arthur Valet. So he was moved from Long Island to Chicago in August. So this is one of the guys. This is still actually, the Chicago one. This isn't the Tampa one yet.
Okay.
This is one, the guy that they found and they were heavily looking into. So he went from Long Island to Chicago in August. Like Oswald was moved from New Orleans to Dallas in October. This guy Valet was also working at a job in a building directly next to where the motorcade would have been, which is I found the address is 625 Western Jackson Street. This is literally what would have been on the motorcade. But once again, Kennedy did not go to Chicago because it was considered it was just like dangerous. But also Dallas was like super dangerous as well. Once again, going back to what me and Shane talked about, Traficante, the mob boss, the the mob boss for Florida, was like said word for word like Kennedy will regret coming here. All I found out about the Tampa plot too was that it was a 27-mile motorcade, which is a lot longer than the 10-mile one in Dallas. So the Secret Service admitted that they were very like concerned with this route, especially this one part where there's this Floridian hotel, because once again the motorcade would change in speed, just like the book near the book depository in Dealey Plaza.
As they're taking the corner there, they have to slow down.
Yeah. And so this guy, Gilberto Policarpo Lopez, a Cuban exile, he attended Fair Play for Cuba meetings. These findings never made it to the Secret Service, which was left in the dark about the poor excuse of security. But it's just, it's nuts, man. Like, there's so many. I was watching a documentary on J. Edgar Hoover too. And J. Edgar Hoover began to despise more RFK more than JFK. Shane made a great point where they almost killed the wrong guy, because like RFK was the one who was Attorney General, who was going after all these mob people, and it's up to debate that when Kennedy needed to win Illinois, and it was well known that like Kennedy probably had to some degree some relationship or understanding with Sam Giancana, who was Chicago, the mob boss in Chicago. So it's like all these crazy things, man. And as you probably heard in the other podcast we did with Shane, it's like, dude, all the stuff that was going behind Kennedy's back that the CIA was doing is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is crazy to think how much goes on like without a president's authority.
It's mind-boggling.
They're just, the CIA and the FBI can basically operate on their own in large part. Like there's continuity there, while the president is just a guy who shows up every 4 years, and they just kind of want him to get with the program.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll try to go through this quick, but once again, personally, I said this in the last podcast, I believe the biggest reason for killing Kennedy, I think it was Allen Dulles and the CIA. Allen Dulles, the longest tenured guy. To mention some more stuff about Allen Dulles, man, in this book, The Devil's Chessboard, which all goes about his life, Allen Dulles was part of, he was part of the OSS, the Operation of Strategic Services, which was the CIA before the CIA in World War II. So before that, man, he ran Sullivan and Cromwell, which was like a firm off Wall Street, the biggest and most powerful one. So before World War II, he had a ton of clients in Europe. And guess what countries?
Russia,
Germany, and some of these other like places and whatever. So when it comes to, to be very clear, I'm not saying like Allen Dulles was like a Nazi sympathizer or whatever, but he got people off. This book that I'm reading, I would love to go on about it, but it would be such a different not rabbit hole, but just another whole piece of information where there were some, not like Goebbels or Himmler or all these other terrible guys like, orchestrated the Holocaust and whatever. But he definitely got a couple people like either a lighter sentence or made, instead of like hanging, like they like died by, in prison or other things. But it was nuts, man. Like a lot of, when I was reading this book, like the actual times when they were hanging a couple of these people, they did it in one place was like a gymnasium. So they didn't like do it out in front of like the world or whatever. I think probably not to make them martyrs, because you think about even like Bin Laden, like I know that's like whatever. It's some things. I'm annoyed that like everything seems to be conspiracy. I'm just saying JFK's absolutely was, and once again through Allen Dulles, man, like there's still so much I have to learn about him, but through him, I think he found like Oswald being a perfect dude, and through that, probably Malcolm Malcolm Wallace or whatever who got off. But I get it to a certain degree why we probably will never know. But it's like, dude, we're never gonna know about Thomas Crooks. Do you know that Thomas Crooks had 6 cell phones?
I did not know that.
Yeah. And they wiped all of. Well, it makes sense, I guess, why they wiped his social media. But the more and more you look at I think the Trump assassination. I think for me personally, I give a little bit of a. That's where this person that I know, when I was having this first conversation, I didn't know what I was talking about, and a lot of people say you don't know now. It's like, it's not bad to talk about though. These are good things to speak of.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interesting thing while we're on Trump, I don't know if anything else, because you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast with Shane about the JFK files.
Yeah.
When they did do the first round of releases about them, they were kind of heavily redacted. There wasn't much information in there, so I don't know. He didn't ever release anything else on that, did he?
When was the first release?
It was like a month ago at this point, wasn't it?
Because
that's kind of like what started the fascination.
Yeah, the 80,000 pages or whatever.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was, even though that it was something that was on the back of my mind where I was hearing, the JFK assassination, and I'm like, I don't really know. Like, I feel, once again, if those guys are listening, they'll probably be laughing. But, dude, you, Joe, and Shane, really, you guys know your history, man. And I'm probably let's be honest, I'm the dumbest out of the group. So I a lot of times I'm like, are you guys aware of this? And like, yes, Ben. Then I'm like, where should I start? Like, this is insane. And thankfully, Shane was, it was great. Me and Shane had a great back and forth. I thought at the end, like I said, the last 20 or 30 minutes are where we really give our own thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's all like specialized knowledge. So like, I feel like I know certain stuff that maybe you guys don't know. But when it comes to like the conspiracy stuff, just listening to the first 2 JFK episodes, I feel like you guys really did your research for that.
I tried, man. I think I did like 20, 25 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was cool, man. It was fun. Even I don't think I said this we did mention the Let Me Know documentary. But I didn't say this part. That specifically makes me want to like congratulate, or at least give the FBI like some, I guess, I don't know if you can just tie in the FBI and the CIA like together, because you sound like you don't know what the F you're talking about, but like the amount of the false eyewitness testimony, the rampant eyewitness testimony, like that Let Me Know documentary, once again, I think it's LEMINO, that is super like, wow, imagine actually like getting into all this, and it's like, such a drag.
And there's so much stuff, like if you've listened to all the other JFK podcasts you've done, there's so much different information going around. I kind of like how that video is just like, we're going to deal only with Lee Harvey Oswald in the book depository on the day.
Yeah, that's a shout out to them, honestly. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it makes it very approachable, I think. Even if you're going into it knowing nothing about it, the narrative is easy to follow.
Yeah, it's so, wow, man. Yeah. So, and it's tough, man, because we want to look at like history and these like figures as like, we want to look at everything black and white, like who's good, who's bad. Like, and even JFK, like we talked about all the stuff about, him like being a war hero and saving people, and like being super like progressive when it came to like civil rights and like black people's rights as well, and all that stuff. And then like, his thing in the closet, that he was like a serial like adulterer basically. And I hearing about Marilyn Monroe's life and whatever. And so it's well believed also that like Marilyn Monroe was also had an affair with Robert F. Kennedy as well.
That I've not heard of, but that is interesting.
Yeah. And dude, it was like, it's just tragic. Like, she just had like a very hard time growing up. Like, she didn't have a father in her life. Her mother like never really accepted her. Obviously she dyed her hair. Like, that platinum blonde was never her real hair.
Yeah.
But then some people even say, man, like the night of her death, like Robert Kennedy was at her house. there are some things where, once again, we can go down conspiracy theories. It's a podcast or whatever. It's cool. It's fine. I would just say, once again, I think the JFK assassination is the absolute. That's where you can really dig your heels in and do all this stuff. I want to do stuff like I want to cover 9/11. I want to cover maybe whether it's something like the Gulf of Tonkin or what are other like famous conspiracy theories.
Famous American conspiracies.
Just different things with like Iraq.
So like MLK shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, dude, even like the FBI was going in super hard. Like J. Edgar Hoover was trying to paint MLK as a like communist, because like J. Edgar Hoover, like, just, to a certain degree, man, at the end of his like time, he was abusing his power.
Yeah, it's crazy to think of, because we think of MLK as being this obvious hero nowadays, but back in the day, he was a super controversial figure.
Wasn't he banging a lot of people, like, too, honestly?
Apparently everyone was. Apparently that's just what was going on back then.
Oh, that's a clip, bro. That's a clip. Okay, so let me go down. So these are just some of my own. I'll try to go down this fast. So just some death tolls like surrounding the assassination. So we had Oswald, once again, so crazy that he's the one that's murdered by Ruby. Then we have Jack Ruby, right? Died of cancer in prison. But also, Jack Ruby was 5 days before he went on to trial to he's visited by this guy, Jolly West. So Lewis Joyland West was, or Joyland Lewis West or whatever. He was a guy that is directly tied to MK Ultra. He's like the MK Ultra doc. MK Ultra, that's another American conspiracy right there.
That is, yeah. That's not, I wouldn't even call it a conspiracy, because a lot of the stuff we know about it is like just leaked documents. Like the government is not even denying that there were some insane experiments going on back in the day with like sleeper soldiers and experimenting with drugs on people.
Absolutely, man.
Which is, makes you wonder what kind of stuff's going on right now that we're not going to know about.
I know.
The next 50 years or so.
Jeez, dude. So then there's this woman, Rose Chermy, right? She's a prostitute of Jack Ruby that was found run over by a car, like hit and run. So she was originally picked up by this guy, Lieutenant Fugue of the Louisiana Police, on the car ride to the hospital. Like, she mentions that there's a plot to kill Kennedy. She mentioned Oswald as well, which this is before anything happened, and this is actually documented. When in the hospital, she mentions this to the doctors as well. 2 days later, the assassination happens. So this guy, Lieutenant Fugue, visits her again. When he picked her up, she was like, on drugs or whatever. And so she implied that there was a sexual relationship between Ruby and Oswald. Just like, dude, there's a lot of gay people. Like David Ferry, I didn't mention this in the first podcast. Like, some stuff about him. He was known as a pedophile, dude. When he was doing his stuff in the, at the least not a pedophile, like with like young dudes, like 13, 14 years old. He was messing with them.
Oh wow.
You'll see this implied in the JFK movie. But that is that's not a conspiracy. Like, he was gay. Also J. Edgar Hoover was gay. like it was pretty well known as well. Like, that's not a conspiracy either.
I've heard that, yeah.
RFK, actually, Robert F. Kennedy, who was Attorney General, actually knew it at the time. So like him, this is what I was going to mention earlier. In previous presidencies, like Eisenhower and Truman, like Hoover could like come and go as he pleased and had direct access to the president. Once John F. Kennedy became president, he had to do everything through RFK. So I don't think Hoover, was involved in obviously the assassination. Once again, you can't have 1,000 people in government. Someone's going to talk.
Yeah.
But so just once again, so this prostitute for Jack Ruby dies 2 years later in Texas, found on a highway with her head flattened, and they called it just like a vehicular homicide. But in the autopsy, she had a gunshot wound to the head. Dude, Dorothy Kilgallen, a New York reporter, found dead in her apartment. She had been super outspoken against the CIA, FBI, and her journalism. She covered many articles and commentary against them over the last couple of years. She was one of the first people to attempt to link the CIA and the mob to the mob part to the assassination. She covered once again the whole JFK thing vigorously before her death. Apparently she died from booze and barbiturates lately, but she was found in her apartment, like reading a book that she had already read in a part of her apartment that she rarely used. She had glasses and she couldn't see without them. Her glasses were on the other side of the apartment, and just like stuff that's not adding up. There was Lee Bowers. He's the guy that saw across the. He was the railroad operator that saw like the mysterious activity going in the grassy knoll and whatever. You had David Ferry mysteriously died of a brain aneurysm. Once again, a day or two before he had to testify. Shane originally like kind of like pushed that off to the side, which if he wants to believe that, it's fine. When you watch JFK, like the way that it's like put in there or portrayed is that whatever. One of these last couple things. Ever heard of Gary Underhill?
I've heard the name.
So Gary Underhill was one of the rare people, super rare case. This is completely credible once again. He was one of the people inside the CIA that believed that it was an inside job, like someone inside it. So days after the assassination, he's at a cookout and he's speaking to a close friend about, it's possible the CIA could orchestrate his death. His friend at the time was leaving the country for like Italy or wherever, and he kiddingly joked to his friend, and he's like, "Oh, maybe I should get out of the country, knowing what all this crazy stuff going on." So he shot himself right behind his left ear, and he's right-handed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you ever do like an MLK episode. I would.
How about me? You could do it.
Yeah,
you could do it down the rabbit hole.
I'd be interested. Well, I'll reserve what I have to say because we might do that episode. But
okay, cool.
I do believe there's a good chance that the CIA was involved with that. Like the Martin Luther King Jr.'s family doesn't believe the guy who they put in jail did it.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. We can get more into that whenever we do that kind of episode, though. I know you'd probably want to do a lot of research.
Yeah, no. Well, I just don't want to say. I mean, I feel like I'm all over the place the first 20 minutes, but I think we're finally starting to get a rhythm, or at least I am, my dumbass. So you want to hear something? This is I might clip. Yeah, this is the one that is literally. Sounds like a movie, bro. So this guy Dag Hammarskjöld was. This is probably one of the last like mysterious deaths underneath all this for the JFK, and then we can move on to other stuff. I might just cut it into 2 different episodes where we do JFK revisit with Dan Scott, with a more reasonable listener. No, just kidding. Dag Hammarskjöld was a guy that Kennedy. I'll pull this up right here. Here we go. Here's him on the screen. Good old Dag. So Dag, I can't pronounce most of his name, but Dag Hammarskjöld was a Swedish economist and diplomat who served as the second Secretary General of the United Nations from April 1953 until his death in a plane crash in September 1961. So, as I mentioned, remember when the CIA was doing coups and whatever? So one of the coups that the CIA, like what we found it out after, like with unreleased released files, is that this guy Patrice Lumumba, who was like the first like democratic leader of Congo, got elected, but he was the CIA like thought he was no good. They were still trying to overthrow what was going on. So this guy got word of what was happening, and he went to President Kennedy and be like, "Hey, we need to stop whatever's going on behind the scenes, and we need to protect like Lumumba or whatever." This guy gets killed in a plane crash where all the bodies are charred except for his body, and there's an ace of spades that was tucked into his collar.
What do you think that means?
So let's be honest. I say that, right? This sounds like Ben. This is a movie. It's made up. You actually see this part in JFK Revisited, where they sort of kind of like black and white graphic photo. You can't find it online, but that actual thing. If you look at, check this out. What happened to Dag Hammarskjöld? Once again, I'm butchering his name. Crashed shortly after midnight on the 17th and 18th of September 1961. So if you look at his death controversy, once again, guys, just repeating. Operation Celeste. So, what caused Hammarskjöld's death? So, aviation incident and accident. So, it's just another. But you listen to some of the stuff like Ace of Spades tucked into someone's collar, and you're like, dude, is this like Mission Impossible? Like, what the hell is going on, man?
Yeah.
I don't. Like, I know that sounds crazy, Dan. That literally happened. And I think this is all, once again, coming from like the military industrial complex. Like, we have to keep fighting these words. Like, Shane mentioned, like Korea and Vietnam and Cuba. And then all these, once again, we already mentioned a couple of coups that were happening. But, dude, at times when I look at this stuff, I'm like, it makes you like, so like, obviously, like, people would use terms like, you need to wake up. You need to see the world for who it is. Like, America is not like the red, white, and blue that you think. Like, America's flag is more like shades of gray. You know, but to some degree, as I said to Shane, like, I don't really think it's the president of the United States that has the most power. It's the people that can retain the power, like, underneath him, that have this expanse of influence and connections, and, you know, obviously to a certain degree blackmail, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with those kinds of organizations like the CIA and the FBI, I think I used this word already, but there's like a continuity of, you can do long-term planning. That's kind of the advantage of a dictatorship over like a presidency, is you have the ability to do long-term planning over like 20, 30 years. And even if it's something that's gonna, you know, hurt at first, you just have the ability to do that. Meanwhile, a president gets into office and he's basically within a couple years already running for re-election. He's already campaigning, and all of his moves have to be calculated in that way. But I think it's kind of obvious that what you're saying is true, because just think about how many different presidents we've had since like Bush, and then Obama, and then Trump, and then Biden. But if you look at the actual actions that we've taken in the Middle East, it's not like there was a dramatic shift. Like, we continue to bomb Iraq, and we continue to bomb Afghanistan. There continued to be civilian casualties under all of those presidents. So it kind of makes you think that there's someone more important calling those kind of shots.
Right. And commonly so, like, could you explain a little bit for people who don't know, like, the Dick Cheney and Halliburton connection when it comes to war in the middle, like Iraq?
Yeah.
Just super dubbed down. Doesn't have to be technical.
That's the idea most people have, is that it wasn't George W. Bush, really, who wanted to start our wars in the Middle East. It was mostly Dick Cheney, his vice president, who was the person who was pushing for that. Yeah,
and I thought you always hear, you know, oh, the vice president doesn't have any power. Like, I mean, I'm sure to a certain degree, like, you know, people thought like, oh, Kamala didn't do much when she was vice president. And then I'm like, well, which one is it? Like, do you have power? Do you not? Like,
yeah.
But then it's like, you have to think about how many presidents were vice presidents before they got there. Like, it's not.
Yeah, I think just having the president's ear in general, if you're the kind of person who's extremely charismatic, extremely persuasive, just being able to talk to the people in power, you can get a lot done that way. You maybe won't get the credit for it.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying with Hoover, because Hoover was able to get in the ear of all presidents. And I'm not saying everything Hoover did was bad, and I'm not going to act like, once again, I think the FBI overall does a good job. I think that CIA is cutthroat as fuck, and we need that. Like, obviously, like, if you think about, like, you know, the best intelligence agency in the world is either CIA or probably Mossad. And think about, like, you know, we won't have to go into Israel because obviously, you know, hot button topic or whatever. But you need these, like, I don't want to immediately just dumb it down to like, oh, nobody wants to do the dirty work or whatever. But to a certain degree, it's like, you would rather be ignorant. Like, that's where I'm like, Ben, how much do you want to actually know about like the things going on behind the scenes? Like, I would love to look at JFK as like this impeccable, untouchable president. I would say the stuff he did, the good things he did, like totally outshined like stuff in the past. But like, I don't know how. What do you think Obama's approval rating was on a random note?
What do we think his approval rating was? I don't know. It was pretty high early on, I think. Then it dipped down towards the end. I don't think it was ever like extremely low.
So this is Biden's approval rating was 37. I felt like it was lower. Trump 41. Oh, about 59%. Yeah, like and Obama, like 59% is probably damn good, right, for president? Well, overall, I think. And he was doing drone strikes. Like,
yeah.
Think about that, man. Like, hey, bring this over here, and it's like real life video games. Like, press this red button, and it's not the president. The president tells a general who tells a lieutenant who tells like a drone operator to do it.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder because if you listen to like 2008 Obama speeches before he became president, all the stuff he's talking about just doesn't line up with wanting to continue the wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
He wanted to
so
shut
what was
down
he saying?
Guantanamo. He wanted to, focus.
Is there anything I could look up that would add to this, or
I wouldn't know what specifically to look up.
You said
you could look up
Guantanamo?
his DNC speech from 2008, but I wouldn't be able to point you to like a specific timestamp or anything. But that was one of the things he was running on heavily in 2008 was closing Guantanamo. It was one of the promises he made, and when he got into office, he changed his mind or had his mind changed.
Well, another thing I found was so interesting. Like, I really like Tulsi Gabbard. I think she could be president someday. So you probably heard me and Shane talking about this. Have you heard the Signal fire or the Signal group chat?
That is the leaked group chats where Pete Hegseth accidentally added the reporter.
So he didn't even do it. It was the head of national security. This guy Steve Witkoff did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was me and Shane did like a little side mini bonus episode, and then we ended up scrapping it. But he ended up saying how, it's like it was like plans like airstrikes in Yemen and whatever. Once again, you talk about like not. You said something earlier about. Just like when it comes to America being involved in stuff that we don't need to be, like Yemen is I think, the poorest nation in the Middle East or the greater Saudi Arabia area. And it's like, dude, why are we even like doing stuff over there? Like, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But going back to Obama and the DNC, I'm trying to see if we can find any small clips recapping. Could we look at this, maybe? Oh, yeah, you were just mentioning stuff about, once again, like having presidents that once they get in, they can't, or they get in a position of power, and it's like, oh, it's not like a haircut where you're just like, well, too bad, I'm buzzing your hair off. It doesn't work like that. And the reason why I brought up the Signal file, this is maybe I can find this. Tulsi Gabbard, who I really, really like, they're grilling her. So once again, the people that are in that group chat as well, dude, which is like crazy that we have like to a certain degree, I think like that actual whole situation is a little bit of not psyop. It's something that's distracting us from other stuff I think that's going on. I don't think it's as bad as it is, but it's still, man, like everybody's in this group chat, man. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, like the director of National Security Intelligence, like Tulsi Gabbard, John Ratcliffe, I think was in there. He's the head of the CIA.
Yeah.
There's
Vance was in there.
Yeah, like the vice president. It's like, oh my god, dude. Apparently there was going to be a second one, but this is where like Tulsi Gabbard is in front of. She's getting grilled by everyone. That was the word I remember that Forbes or whoever used. Let's see if we can use some of this.
Classified phones, obviously reckless, obviously dangerous. Both the mishandling of classified information and the deliberate destruction of federal records, potential crimes that ought to be investigated immediately. And I want to make clear that I'm of
Yeah, this is a
Mr. Rogers'
congressman.
resignation, starting with the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense. Director Radcliffe and Director Gabbard, have you participated in any other group chats with senior Trump administration officials in which classified information was shared using phones that weren't cleared for such information? Question for the two of you.
Senator, thank you for the question. I haven't. Your question was, have I?
This is the head of the
participated in
CIA, John
any
Ratcliffe.
Other group chats.
That's
sharing
Gabbard, obviously.
classified information. To be clear, I haven't participated in any signal group messaging.
So whatever, I'll just stop this right here because the audio isn't great. But so what, like him and Tulsi Gabbard both say is that like we have no awareness of this. Like we're just hearing about it now. And the Congress people are grilling him like, how do you not know and whatever. And I remember the first time I saw when the FBI director when everyone was like going at them for like the Trump assassination attempt. They were just giving their what's the word? Their straw man or steel man. Like basically they were just saying the same thing over. Like we're not aware of this. We will get down to the bottom of it. And the Congress and everyone and the American people are like the accountability and whatever. And it's so interesting because once again my perspective is really being changed because it's like you want accountability, but from now on, like Tulsi Gabbard just mentioned that just a couple days ago that she really is working on, like her and the new guy Kash Patel, the director of the FBI now, their goal is transparency, like Epstein files, 9/11, JFK. And to be honest, like Trump has been like doing his best with that stuff, but or at least releasing those things, but like how there's just so much, there's just that interesting dichotomy of like you guys want to know what's going on, but you probably don't actually want to know what's going on because it's going to scare the out of you. Think about how many attempts on just president's life. You said this forever ago, like an hour ago probably when we were talking, you know?
I think, listen, there are some things, I don't know, have you ever heard the word cognito hazard before?
No.
That's basically the idea is just a piece of information that's too dangerous to release because it would cause like massive unrest or...
Exactly. And even not that, thank you for saying that, by the way. This made me add on to what I was just about to say, is that not only it's like, would you be like scared or worked up or whatever, but it's like we have people in other countries and whether it's a cartel group, a terrorist group, people in the area, soldiers, battle plans, technology or whatever. It's like, dude,
yeah,
like if this comes out, this compromises them. So you're like effectively like they're, people they'll use and rightfully so now, which is when I was talking to this one person, I'm like, I can't, like they got me because I'm like, yeah, man, like with certain things, like you can't know everything about the Trump assassination, whatever. But the thing is when they're like, don't even ask about it, don't bother. Or if they give you an example, like you can't, it was like, JFK was 70 years ago or 9/11 was whatever. I'm like, all right, well,
yeah.
Obviously we mentioned a little bit of stuff going on, but I just think it's crazy and whatever. So I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on that specific thought of, once again, like power in America and the kind of the push and pull and like, what can you do as a citizen?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to do a podcast with your 25
going to
subscribers?
I'm going to expose everyone on the last house on the left. And
oh, it's a short list.
Everyone will know after this, and they're going to be gunning for me. No, but
well, Shane already got killed, so.
Yeah, Shane's already dead.
I thought he was a Russian accent. He looks like that guy Sanarev, the Boston bomber. I'm sorry to make a joke about that, but. I mean, look at his license.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, when it comes to the idea of, like, sensitive information about, like, agents we might have in other countries operating, that's what it comes down to with a lot of like these leaks, like the Chelsea Manning leak. I know led to some.
What was that again? Refresh my memory.
That was, I don't remember specifically what that was. I know Snowden was connected to like WikiLeaks and stuff.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. That's so interesting.
So Snowden had a bit more of like a controlled, like, here are the specific parts of the information that I gathered that show the United States government violating Constitution.
Yeah.
And it was very specific, and he probably held back a bunch of bad stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of these podcasts that have like CIA and FBI people, they're very against like how Snowden did it because they're like, you're exposing people in the field.
Yeah.
And but then Snowden's like, this is so bad, and yeah, I'm just sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. I was just trying to think ahead, where because Snowden, he can never come back to America, right? Like he's screwed.
Yeah, no, he can't.
Like
He'd be arrested immediately.
But like I don't know, going over to Russia is like maybe that's because like Americans, you're not gonna find Americans over there.
Yeah, and America's not going to like talk to Putin and be like, "Hey, please send this guy back to us. We're friends, right?" They're gonna be like, no."
Man, I thought it was so interesting too. I think I mentioned this to Shane. Khrushchev actually went to John F. Kennedy's funeral, which I thought was so interesting because that's the height of the Cold War. But I'm like, I guess you're supposed to like keep your, you're supposed to like keep that like political like neutral face or whatever. But I don't know, man. And then we have stuff like, we have like Zelensky in the Oval Office or whatever. I just saw on TV that he's coming back over here for some reason. You know, probably the same as last time. What did you think of that whole exchange? I've had a couple times where I tried to talk about it on the podcast, but
yeah, I think JD Vance kind of overblew the idea that the Ukraine hasn't thanked us for our support.
A little closer, yeah.
Ukraine hasn't thanked us for support in the war. I think they have on multiple occasions.
You think it's petty?
I think it was a bit petty, yeah. I think it's reasonable to question continuing to send money over to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because it just goes with Trump's whole thing about he doesn't want the United States to just be supporting Europe and doing all of Europe's work for them. So,
well, because didn't he go right? He went over right to the UN nations or the UN, and people were like hugging him as he came in and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of liked it in a way where I'm like, I like that like Trump kind of like, I don't want to be like, oh, he put him in his place and that's like the way to be, because it's not just more like that. But then I get scared, man, sometimes because like Trump's saying like, he's like flirting with this whole thing with Iran, and I'm like, dude, like, why? Like you said, like you're gonna stop all these wars.
That's the real thing for me with the SIGNALGATE, is I feel like everyone is focusing on the aspect of it of, oh, it got leaked, the group chat got leaked, and it's kind of just flown under the radar. Like, yeah, we're bombing Yemen. Like, yeah, I mean, I didn't know. Were we doing that before? Because that could have started a couple months ago. That seems like something we'd do. It is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and even like with that, when that all happened, like the plan worked. Like we bombed the hell out of them, you know. Well, our government did, you know. So everything went according to plan. Like nothing got. It just doesn't make sense. So the guy that's in that group chat, that journalist, what's his name? Is it Jeffrey? I think it's Jeffrey Goldberg. He was the one who, like, forever ago, like, he runs the Atlantic, which apparently has, like, not a great, like, reputation or whatever. He was the one that was, like, pretty much, he really, really pushed the Trump-Russian asset thing for a while.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely false, you know, absolutely false. Just makes you wonder, man, like, when we hear all this stuff, it makes me think, like, there's so many, like, powerful people in the world, but think about, like, most of these people, like the Trumps, the Putin's, CIA, all these people, you know, they're all humans, you know, they've got two legs, like, they eat, sleep, and poop like all of us, like, they, you know, they feel fear and the anxiety, but they're hateful as well, like, they rage, and, you know, these are, like, people that, you know, anywhere from like 5'7" to 6'5" or whatever, like just like your normal, not normal human beings, but like because of it's just interesting, like looking at it from 1,000-point view, like these small people that are as tall as me and you are like can create destruction like all over the world.
Yeah, and it can just be based on some completely random thing that you won't even know about. I don't know. I think that's why the separation of power is important, so
Yeah.
that no one person can just kind of do whatever they want.
Yeah. And one thing that that I've just been thinking about more is like how much I keep hearing these things that like, oh, like Trump's first 100 days or the first 180 days or the first 2 years, like, or you have elections like really every 2 years or whatever. Because what's the word prelim?
The midterm
Yeah, the
elections.
I'm like, so damn, like how much can you actually get done?
Yeah.
Because like like once again, I'm President Sontag. I have to go through this person, which goes through this person, which Congress, the Senate, like
Yeah, it feels like
states. It's like
if you have Trump has like
it's
a
working
majority.
almost against itself. Yeah.
Trump has the Senate and the House. You know, he has a good amount
that
of
is true.
support. But I feel like if the Senate and the House are blue and you're red, or vice versa,
Yeah.
if you're red and the Senate and the House are blue, it can kind of just screw you over. Like you're gonna spend so long. All they have to do is block you out for the remainder of your term.
Yeah. And that was super interesting too, because I remember, if you don't mind me saying this, you weren't someone that voted for Trump or whatever, because we had a good, one of the probably the best podcasts you came on. This is technically your third, well, technically second, but really your third time.
Yeah.
You've made some great points that you were saying about last time, which is cool because a lot of our friends are, I did vote for Trump as well, but I almost didn't want to vote, man. Like I said, the only sorry if you turn off me getting super. Nah, I think we're being okay. Like we're not being totally politically out there. Where it's just the more and more I look at things, it's like some of these like people that I really trust in my life now, like the Rogans, the Patrick Bet-Davids, which Patrick Bet-David's a little bit to the right, but Chris Cuomo, Rogan. All these people, these big podcasts that I follow, they're all like really like center, like left people, and
Yeah, Rogan's kind of weird because he supported Bernie and then he supported Trump later.
yeah, everyone that doesn't love Rogan's like, oh, he's a hard right guy, or he's definitely like a right guy. I'm like, dude, this guy's like pro sex work. He's like pro weed.
Yeah, I think he's anti-establishment, which is why he liked Bernie and Trump, because they both kind of represented, like the DNC didn't want.
Isn't that what
anything
Trump
to do
ran on in 2016? Is that I'm gonna be anti-establishment and
Yeah,
yeah.
because he was a complete outsider, so that means he didn't have any existing like allies or enemies in politics, so he could come in as like a neutral party.
Yeah, but it's weird how like these certain people that we like elect or whatever, obviously as like it's democracy and they have the power, but they look like and they're the same height and same problems as you and me. But sometimes it's like, man, like it's hard for me to sometimes believe that like, for me as a Christian, like I should be like, oh, God is in control. I'm like, absolutely, but I'm like, dude, also the world is the world. Like it's not like God. There are times where God works miracles and things rapidly change. And there are topplings of empires and whatever. Like America's probably the modern day empire as well. I mean, there's China's coming up around the border or whatever, or coming. Excuse me, I meant coming right up on our heels.
Yeah, China is looking to be the next big superpower if we, don't get our crap together. Got myself.
Yeah, and even when I was telling Dad, like Dad was telling me after a while, he's like, Ben, maybe you should take a little bit of a break with all the CIA, like JFK stuff, because like it's dark stuff. And then I had him watch JFK, and I don't think the movie itself. I took the movie I'm like it was entertaining, and there was some stuff that was right, stuff that was probably a little bit wrong or exaggerated. When it first came out, it was super controversial because people thought it just like entertains conspiracy theories and whatever. It kind of really made a couple of these actual committees now that are going on, but I just can't. I kind of like, dude, like the world is too powerful. I don't know how God operates with all these things going on. Like it's like when do you see like people actually shift, like or come underneath like the crushing power of like a all-seeing, all-knowing God? Because it seems like a little bit like things are running rampant these days. I'm not even trying to make like all these political like smart or in the middle statements. I'm just saying like whether like, dude, like another thing that I mentioned to Tibbs a little bit while ago is like, dude, in Syria, there's a ton of Christians getting like killed and massacred. You don't see it on television.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make that like, I'm not trying to like, I'm just saying that also happens as well as these other like serious other, basically there's a couple other places where genocide's happening and whatever. Sorry to use a crazy word like that. I'm just like, how can, do you still got a couple more minutes? I
Yeah.
love where we're going.
Yeah, we can keep going for a little bit. Yeah, it is crazy. I don't know. I feel like it's especially crazy. Like, not that there's more going on nowadays, but because of the fact that we all have phones and computers, it's like something happens, you know about it within 5 minutes. And specifically, you know the very basics of what happens, which
Yeah.
means everyone instantly starts to speculate. And it kind of grows a life of its own. And you can't even know what's going on with, you know, the things that are in the news. Because by
Yeah.
the time people have figured out exactly what happened, it's almost like everyone's moved on and we're on to the next.
Yeah, just an endless like stream where you can't even catch up, and so it's just tough, man. I don't.
Yeah, it is hard to keep it all together in your head as like a coherent thing when it really is just like crazy stuff happening all over the place all the time.
Yeah, this might be a little bit of a pivot, but so when I was listening to this podcast with this guy Lee Cronin, whatever, they were talking about like religion and how like it affects like you know world wars and or just like how how the world operates and whatever. And he said like religion is used as a device to control populations, like critical thinking and society as a whole. I think it was those three things. Where would you fall with stuff like that? Because the more I think about it, like, dude, think about the like. Obviously, it's easy to be like, oh, the Crusades were terrible, but it's like, dude, like look at Islam. Like radical Islam, of course, is like very different than normal practicing Muslims. But and you can put like other faiths down there as well.
Yeah. So what I would say is
Not trying to trap you. I was just
no. I just need to collect my thoughts kind of for a minute here. I would say historically, that's definitely like if you look at some of the stuff the Catholic Church was doing back in the days with like, it was almost like the king was one center of power and then the church was another center of power. And it was like the church had massive amounts of land and massive amounts of power. And we both grew up Protestant, which I think is kind of a different idea. It's not like a centralized large body of power. It's just kind of like individual groups of individual communities coming together to come and agree on one interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah.
But I would say in the past, it definitely has been used as like a tool of power for people. But I would say radical Islam, the reason that shows up is just because of the locations, like the places where they are so poor and so war-torn and destitute that like it allows that. I feel like people who live in those kinds of conditions are more likely to become radicalized.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Like a lot of America, we're now living in like a postmodern or what's not postmodern would be accurate, but like we're like a post-Christian society. Like I wouldn't consider America Christian anymore. Like Trump tries to do his thing, but I'm like Trump is no Christian. Like I don't want. That's one thing I'm really willing to go to bat at people for, not because I'm trying to like go at him on different things, because there's a lot.
Yeah, that is always kind of been weird to me, because like whether or not you think the qualities Trump has are good qualities to have as a world leader, you know, like screwing people over, being loud and outspoken and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe those are good traits for a leader, but like, I don't know. It's not very Christ-like, I would say, the way
Well said, man.
he operates.
And that's one thing I'm worried about.
And okay, sorry to interrupt you.
Nope.
The one thing that's insane to me is that he sells Trump Bibles, which are like...
Are you serious?
Yeah. You can look that up if you want. It's like the Constitution and the Bible next to each other, and I think they're like signed. And I'm like, is that not the most sacrilegious thing?
Hey Siri. What Shut up, Siri. Wow, dude.
Yeah, there he is. There's his name right above Holy Bible. And just listening to him, like he's talked at churches before, and I don't know, it doesn't really come off like he's the type of guy who reads the Bible.
Like, that's stuff that, like, God just, like, does not, like, he doesn't, he's not going to overlook stuff like that. Yeah, I just don't, that's an unfortunate thing with this guy, unfortunately, man. It's like, you just get, like, there's too much, there's too much I can't defend you on, you know?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. There's always a new thing every week. That's almost like his strategy, I think.
Wasn't that the whole thing with tariffs? Like, we don't have to talk about and go into tariffs, but
yeah, just flooding the zone with just a new controversy all the time, and it kind of like, I don't know. I feel like you can never take what he says as like what he actually means, which is the problem.
yeah, I'm going to throw Hillary in jail. That didn't
Yeah,
happen. I think that was probably a good move, though.
It's probably a bad precedent to start like throwing your presidential rivals in jail after you get into office. That probably.
Well, that's when like the media is like, oh, he's gonna start like becoming this dictator or whatever.
Not to say that Hillary Clinton or a lot of politicians don't deserve to go to jail. I'm just saying you're starting a very dangerous precedent if you start doing that.
Yeah, it was interesting, man. With this guy too, Lee Cronin, like, like I said, he's the Regis Professor of Chemistry in Glasgow, and he's also like was a DARPA scientist. He said on Julian Dory this amazing phrase where I just thought like the phrase. I'll just say it, and maybe you can give your thoughts as well as mine. This really like just made me think. He said, "I don't believe in God, but I do believe in wonder." And when I was thinking about it, I was like, what is that? What is that like a dumb thing to say? But then I was like, wow, what an intelligent take. Because another thing too, bro, where I just like shout out to my Christians listening, like, you need to like, us Christians need to stop being insecure when you hear another viewpoint. Like, holy, like, it's a little bit like overwhelming how fragile like our egos and minds are. And we've talked about this a couple times over the last couple of years. But I was like, what a from not having the viewpoint that I grew up with and still overall believe, it's like, what an interesting way of looking at things.
Yeah, I don't know. That quote you gave, the way I kind of interpreted it, I don't know if this is how he meant it, but like, even if I don't specifically believe in like the Bible or anything like that, I do feel like religion and faith is almost like an intrinsic part of the human experience. Like it's a part of almost every culture, and tons, like the majority of people throughout history. So I do feel like there has to be something there, even if it's not necessarily the specific faith that I was brought up with.
Yeah, I guess like everyone has faith in something. Like I would say you like say people have a lot of faith in like the American government or whatever, you know. And that guy also was saying in that podcast that like his religion is curiosity in being, and like this was a guy that was working on like mega computers when he was like 12 or whatever. And so yeah, it's just interesting. I think too, once again, like with people like having their faith, and even like I feel like a lot of people's faith too, like even like, I know we're hitting like every like hot topic subject, I love it, but even like say when the COVID stuff was happening, like a lot of like us like people that I would consider brothers and sisters in the faith are like, you can't trust the science, and then it's like, are you an idiot? Like if you're unless you're a critical, I guess that's me just like speaking in general terms, but why can't it be yes and like faith and science, like faith and tolerance to people that you don't agree with, or at least like debate. Like I feel like a lot of us, I mean, you see a lot of stuff with me and Shane when we argue about stuff. It's probably annoying at times, but it's also a little bit good, at least especially for me and him, because we can actually like have a disagreement and then we can go get food or
Yeah.
we can go play NBA or play golf.
Yeah, no, I've seen you guys like completely disagreeing with each other, like almost getting mad at each other, but then at the end of the conversation, it's just like, huh, we were just sharing ideas.
You're like, Ben, it's 11:45 on Saturday. Like, can you leave?
Yeah.
I just, yeah, man, it's so, I don't know. I want to go into this one other segment. We are at an hour and a half, but I wanted to break it down into 2 episodes, but I don't want to make you late for your thing.
Can we do it in 10 minutes, do you think?
It's AI.
Hmm.
So that's
I
what's
kind of
tough.
want to, I don't know how long I'd have to wait to do another episode, but I kind of want to do a whole episode.
Just on AI?
Yeah, I mean, we can throw in other stuff, but like mainly about AI.
Okay. Yeah, do you have a lot of thoughts on it and whatever? I
Yeah.
think
And you wanted to talk about DARPA. I don't know what specifically, but
I just wanted to know like the next what the next thing is coming when it comes to or the geez, Ben, speak English. The like new technology that America has and what how like that even looks in the future, cuz like we're talking about AI doing our dishes and like
yeah.
freaking having like a sex robot and all this stuff. I'm like, dude, fix the potholes in Gilmington first of all,
Yeah.
and then worry about that.
I'm curious. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about UBI before.
No,
Have you heard
what's
of that?
that?
Universal basic income. The idea of like you get $1,000 every month from the government. That was the whole thing Andrew Yang was running on.
Oh, really?
But the whole
That's
idea,
an old name.
Yeah. The whole idea with that is if AI continues to take jobs away from people and those jobs aren't being replaced with new jobs, then you're going to have massive unemployment. And how do you solve that? You either have to create jobs or the government has to start providing for people. So I don't. This is very much like a theoretical idea. I don't think there's any countries in the world that are implementing something like this. I mean, I guess you could say it's kind of like welfare, but it's not like welfare because it's for all citizens of the country.
Yeah. Well, read some of this, Dan, where it says in favor and against.
Okay. Speaking of AI, I think this is the Google AI summary.
Yeah, it is. AI overview. I try not to always do this, but AI and Wikipedia, but you never know.
Yeah, it's fine for something like this, I think. So in the pros column, poverty reduction, obviously economic security, increased labor market participation. See, that's an interesting one. I feel like the way I've heard UBI talked about, it's almost like a replacement for the fact that people wouldn't be able to participate in the labor market.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so in the arguments against, obviously, disincentive to work, that's the same argument people have against like welfare systems in general.
Yeah.
Is that, oh, you can just live off the money and you don't have to work. So that's why I'm talking about this in like a theoretical future where AI replaces a huge amount of jobs.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. So what is Elon Musk's man, we're already get into it. So what is his like idea of when all these like I don't know why, I don't know how you could explain against it. That would be not better, but like, you know, even now we talk about in America of all places, one of the best places to live in the world, where we're always fighting over like jobs and getting people more jobs and bringing more jobs to America.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
I don't know. There's definitely a lot of, this would be hard to get passed through, I think, just because there are a lot of people who don't like the Social Security, and that's just because they feel like it, I don't know. We have a big work ethic, I think, in this country.
Yeah.
Of like the idea of like you have to work, you kind of get meaning through work in your life. Not as much as like Japan or something, but definitely a lot more than other countries, other like similar European countries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how you can see like the push of how what you just said, but then we'll see like people that are like my 500 pound that just don't do anything and live on welfare.
Yeah.
And just, you know, eat Cheez-Its all day and just pizza and, you know, my normal calorie consumption, you know. So
Yeah.
Dan Scott, we got to get into AI next time you come on. Maybe I'll have you on a little bit more sooner than last time. This was great, man. Thanks for listening to the whole Loy factor testimony. I think it was it took a little bit while for me to explain, but I just think the thought, I just can't. That's, just regardless of accuracy, that's something where it just grabs my attention, and I can't really get it out of my head. So,
All right. Well,
cool.
thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Sounds good. We'll go. We'll put on our tinfoil hats. We'll do aliens, AI, all that. So,
Ooh, aliens.
see
Nice.
you guys. Bye.